because Cleo and Hank did not want to be identified or photographed, we have chosen to accommodate them by switching to black screens. You will hear the audio of those interviews in this video, but you will not see the faces. When the interview continues with Michelle and myself, then you will see our faces. But the black screen is to accommodate Cleo and Hank. Hank, you first, then you, Cleo.
It was very difficult dealing with me discovering who I was and trying to incorporate that into my family life. My mother especially was difficult. She was really the ostrich with the head in the sand. For a long time, she simply didn't want to know. And whenever the conversation would come up and I'd try and broach it with her, she would say, "Oh, no, that's not really what you are. You're just going through something."
When did these discussions begin?
You know, I can remember distinctly going to our family church is in San Francisco, and every Sunday almost we would go to church and then go to my grandmother's who lived in the city afterwards. And I was very young. I want to say 12, 13, maybe when the first conversation happened. Maybe as late as 14, but I'm sure no later than that.
Okay, so what was the discussion? Were you like Michelle? Michelle said she was like 5 or 6. She knew she was different and didn't know exactly what that meant. How old were you when you became self-aware that you were different?
Very early. There are pictures of me in our family album of me sitting on the floor, the living room floor of our home, and I'm wearing, I think, my grandmother, my great aunt's church hat. I have a purse on my arm, and I have on one of their lady sandals, and I couldn't have been any older than 4. So I very early identified with the females in the family and the female energy, and there were a lot more females to male ratio in my family line. So they had a lot to do with my formative years, and really by the time I hit junior high, maybe even into elementary, because of the way I was received at school and treated by my classmates, I had a very strong female orientation.
How were you treated by your...
Well, it was a mixture. It could often be ridicule because I was extremely feminine. The word sissy used to be thrown at me a lot. But then I noticed that the boys, and again we're talking elementary school, very young, before 12, when no one was looking, would try and come over to me and become friendly. So I kind of learned early on that I had a certain something others didn't. And it was not to be despised, as you may think from the ridiculing, but actually it was something that they were drawn to. And over the years, quite naturally, I built upon that.
13 or 14?
13 or 14.
Trying to have these discussions with your mother?
Yes.
And?
They didn't go well. She did not choose to believe that that was really... Because we started having the discussions at the same time that the hormonal change comes to all of us. And so she really thought it was just part of me changing. And I was going through a phase, and that I would open my eyes and soon recognize that the heterosexual life was for me. Unfortunately, as I got older, her disappointment grew because I became more and more really entrenched in the ways that I showed early on. And that was femininity.
And when did you come out of the closet, so to speak?
I'm not really sure I was all the way in. There were parts of me hanging out.
The door was ajar.
And half of me was in and half of me was out. Well, certainly by the time I was in high school, I think it was well known to everybody. Again, in my family, it was not discussed. It wasn't really focused on. But I knew they knew I was different. For example, my aunts, whenever we'd have these get-together, my aunts and sometimes the uncles would go to different cousins of mine and say, "Oh, so you're thinking about settling down? Who's your girlfriend?" Nobody ever asked me that. They knew it was a non-applicable situation. So it wasn't discussed, but everybody kind of knew. And then as I got later in high school, I had some high-profile, well-publicized events happen to me that...
Such as?
I became involved with some of the more popular male sports athletes at our school. And...
Romantically involved.
Romantically and sexually. And I confided in certain people. Michelle was one of them. She knew quite a bit, but there were others. And because I was still very young and didn't really know how the dynamics can work when you have females who are close friends to you, but you also happen to like the same thing, the same boys. So I found myself in some betrayal situations. And because of that, secrets that I wanted to be held got out, and then it just kind of spiraled downhill from there. So there were some well-publicized events at the school that the whole school found out about, and I became on Front Street, for lack of a better term, because of it.
You were going to school with Michelle. Were you in the same class?
We were.
Was she someone that you could confide in? Did you both recognize that you were quote-unquote different?
Yes, we did.
What did you notice about Michelle?
The male energy, even back then, was very evident.
Explain for someone who doesn't know Michelle. What did you notice about her?
Well, I think to explain in full detail, you first have to understand the history of our school. At the time that we were there, it was known as the fashion capital of all the high schools in the Bay Area. It had a very strong reputation for the caliber or the quality of the students that went there, how much effort they put into their look. And in particular, it had a reputation for having the vast majority of beautiful girls there. So almost all the girls that went to that school were into their appearance, and a very feminine one at that. Michelle stood out because she did not go for that look. She had more of a fashionable tomboy appearance. So in a school like ours, that made someone like her stand out. And that's what I first noticed. Then, as we got to talk, it's hard to kind of put into terms how someone like myself, who couldn't really come all the way out of the closet in those days, can identify someone else who you just know, as a sixth sense, is going through a similar situation. In the beginning, I didn't really know that much about her. I didn't know that she was attracted to the girls at our school and the girls only. But gradually, as we talked, I learned these things.
Fellow traveler, kindred spirit.
Yes.
You knew that pretty quickly.
Yes.
Okay.